Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the July 9th, 2020 telephonic teleconference of the Memphis and Shelby County Land Use Control Board. My name is Mary W. Sharp, and I will be serving as your chairperson today. We will begin this morning's meeting with a roll call. Mr. White, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me, first of all?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Okay, great. Mr. Fleming?
Here.
Mr. Gill?
Here.
Vice Chair Miles Wallace?
Here.
Mr. McKinnon?
Here.
Dr. Pritchard?
Here.
Ms. O'Connell?
Here.
Mr. Thomas?
Here.
Ms. Wilbanks?
Here.
And Chair Sharp?
Here.
We have 9 attending.
Thank you, Mr. Whitehead. Everyone should already have a copy of today's agenda for this July 9th, 2020 telephonic meeting. Anyone who wishes to be a speaker on today's agenda has already filled out the attendance speaker's card, and it is in the hand of Mr. Whitehead. When it is time for you, he or Mr. Ragsdale will call your name, will unmute you at the appropriate time for you to speak. Please wait about 10 seconds before speaking so you can be properly unmuted and so that we can hear all of your remarks. At this point, I would like to read our conflict of interest statement. The adopted policy of the Land Use Control Board requires that any member of the board recuse himself or herself from any participation in the discussion or voting on any matter on the meeting's agenda in which he or she may have direct or indirect personal interest. The members shall, in this teleconference, let us know verbally they are recusing themselves during deliberation on any matter from which they have recused themselves. An abstention may substitute for a recusal for the purposes of maintaining a quorum. I would now like to get approval of our 11th meeting, Land Use Control Board meeting. May I have a motion?
Move approval of the minutes from the previous meeting.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved by Dr. Pritchard and second by Ms. Wilbanks. Do we have any discussion? Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I assume we are ready to vote. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, if you don't mind, when you make a motion, please say your name so we'll know. I just happen to know those two beautiful voices. Okay, Mr. Whitehead, may I please get a secretary's report for this month and an explanation of today's procedure?
Yes, ma'am. As I usually start meetings, we are being streamed live on YouTube, and there's a link on our agenda as well as from the Land Use Control Board's homepage to that link. And since the last time we met, we have achieved the 100 subscriber mark. So now we have our own unique address, which is, just for reference, youtube.com/C as in channel / Division of Planning and Development. A couple more notes. During this pandemic, we missed an important milestone.
You're going in and out, Mr. Whitehead. I can't hear you.
Okay. I'm going to step outside to excuse the traffic noises. Can you hear me a little better now, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Okay. We missed an important milestone during the COVID pandemic, and that was our 100th anniversary. Even though the powers of this body were bestowed upon it by the General Assembly in 1921, the Planning Commission existed for a year based on an ordinance passed by the City of Memphis, and its first meeting was March 20th. So we'll have to wait till March 20, 2120 to do a proper bicentennial, since we missed our centennial party. And what's a party anyway, right? Those are long past. Note number 3, there was a case, a 2-lot planned development on the west side of Garland in the Evergreen neighborhood. That matter was held a couple times by this body. The applicant has withdrawn that request based upon communication he has had with the neighborhood. We anticipate it being refiled at some point in the future. We just had a filing deadline Monday, so if it does come back, it'll be September or later. Here's our procedures, Madam Chair. And am I sounding okay?
Pretty good.
Yes.
Pretty good. Well, pretty good is, I guess, par for the course these days. The procedures for our meeting will be as follows. We will set up a consent calendar for those cases that have no opposition, and Ms. Wilbanks will call those out. And then following our consent agenda, again, the consent agenda is for cases where no board member or applicant or opposition has any issue with those cases. At the conclusion of the consent calendar, we'll go to the regular calendar, and we will hold each case. We'll have 3 of those in the following manner. The staff with the Office of Planning and Development will give a presentation, including maps, our findings, the applicant's request. Then we will turn the floor over to the applicant to present his or her case, followed by, and the applicant has 10 minutes total. That includes 10 minutes, that 10 minutes includes not only his or her opportunity to speak, but any supporters. At the conclusion of that 10-minute time frame, we'll go to the opposers, those who are opposing the application. And again, they'll have a total of 10 minutes. Finally, we'll turn it over back to the applicant for a 2-minute rebuttal. Before we get to the consent agenda, Ms. Wilbanks, there's a couple unique items on our agenda that I wanted to briefly discuss. Those are remanded cases. I think the last time we had a remanded case was several years ago, but these 2 cases are being remanded to this body based upon a city council resolution compelling the holding of neighborhood meetings prior to the cases being heard by this body. Well, on these 2 cases that are at the beginning of your agenda, which y'all have heard before, those neighborhood meetings have now been held, and so they are ready for your vote. My only word of advice is these are brand new hearings, as they say, de novo, a brand new trial, if you will. If you change your vote, you, a board member, change your vote, my recommendation is you explain why you change it so our record can reflect that. With that, Madam Chair, if Ms. Wilbanks is ready, I have the following cases eligible for the consent agenda. Those are numbers 3, 4, 5, and 7. And Ms. Wilbanks, if you would like, I have a friendly amendment to number 3. With that, Madam Chair, I'll turn the floor back over to you.
Okay, before she goes on, there's more to the explanation of procedures. Following all the presentations and after the chair will ask if the board members have any additional questions of anyone who spoke. Then the chair will close the public hearing portion of the case and entertain a motion on the matter discussed and then vote on the application. If an applicant or any speaker would like to be heard after the conclusion of the public hearing portion of the case, or if a board member wishes to hear any additional comments from any party for additional clarification, a motion will need to be made along with a second, and then 2/3 affirmative vote of the board is required to reopen the public hearing portion of the agenda item. If the public hearing is reopened, both the applicant and the opposition will be allowed an equal amount of time to provide additional testimony. After the additional comments, we will revert back to the original motion to close the public hearing portion of the case and deliberate and take the final vote. If any of the member of the audience wishes to provide testimony in support or in opposition, he or she should have already filled out a speaker's card and provided it to Mr. Whitehead. Okay, and thank you, Mr. Whitehead, for your explanation. I have one more thing before the consent agenda. The Land Use Control Board is a supporter of community involvement, and we recommend neighborhood comments and feedback. We are respectful of the fact that many of you have taken off work, adjusted work schedules, or adjusted your schedules, even if you are still at home, to be heard today via telecom. But we ask that your comments be made within the time frame allowed. If there are multiple speakers, please try not to be repetitive with your side's limited time. In one of our cases today, we have about 12 people in opposition, so keep that in mind that you only have 10 minutes. Lastly, I'd like to ask you to silence all your cell phones so as not to interrupt or disturb anyone during today's proceedings, as these can still be heard if you are unmuted via this telecom. We're ready to move to the consent agenda, and with our procedures now explained, I would like to introduce Ms. Lisa Wilbanks again, who will be this morning's consent agenda chairperson. Ms. Wilbanks, will you read those items which will be on the consent agenda?
Yes, ma'am. Item number 1, case PD 93-352 in Hickory Hill. The request is a car wash at the northeast corner of Winchester and Riverdale. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions, and we have a friendly amendment which Mr. Whitehead is going to read into the record.
Thank you, Ms. Wilbanks. And I think that this is agenda item number 3.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And the friendly amendments address conditions 3, 4, and 5. If you follow along with me on the staff report, this is page 26 of the staff report. Condition number 3 has a new sentence or a new phrase at the end of its existing language. The existing language reads, "The existing detached sign on the property along the Winchester frontage shall be removed," and here's the new language, "or be the only detached sign permitted as an integrated center sign in accordance with section 4.9.7D8. Second amended condition is condition number 4. It shall read, "Only one attached sign per facade shall bear a commercial message." Strike the language, "Such signs shall not exceed 35 feet." The unified does not limit attached sign square footage. And finally, condition number 5, existing language is 2 detached pole signs shall be permitted. Here's inserted language, comma, 1 sign on Riverdale and 1 on Winchester if the Winchester sign is not an integrated center sign as conditioned above, period. And the rest of the condition carries on. Those are the 3 friendly amendments.
All right. Item number 4, case SUP 20-05 in Annisdale Snowden. The request is a special use permit to allow off-site surface parking at 1177 and 1183 Minna Place to serve adjacent office building. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Item number 5, case PD 11-316 in Southeast Memphis. The request is a major modification to permit a blood plasma donation center at 6500 Quince Road. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Item number 7, case Z20-06 in Capelville. The request is a zoning reclassification of 10 acres located at the southwest corner of East Shelby Drive and Malone Road from commercial mixed use and conservation agricultural district to employment district. Staff recommendation is approval. That's it.
Okay. Ms. Wilbanks, you have read them now. Can you do that in the form of a motion so that we can vote?
Certainly.
Or was that motion?
Okay.
Was that your motion as you read it?
No. Now I'm going to move to approve item number 3, case PD 93-352 as amended. Item number 4, case SUP 20-05. Item number 5, case PD 11-316. And item number 7, case Z20-06.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Who said second? Dr.
Pritchard? Yes.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion on the consent agenda motion? Hearing none, I assume we're all ready to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Now for the regular agenda. Dr. Pritchard, will you please call our next item that's on the regular agenda?
Agenda item number 1, PD 20-01, Cooper Young, 4-unit townhouse at the southwest corner of Barksdale and Nelson. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions.
Is the applicant present?
Yes.
Okay. Since there is opposition, we will hear the case from the OPD staff member.
Good morning, everyone. Brian Bacchus with the Office of Planning and Development. I am presenting this case to you this morning on behalf of my colleague, Mr. Jeffrey Penzis. First of all, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Adequately. Okay. Thank you. The first case is PD 20-01. This is the Barksdale case that was heard last month. The first slide is the zoning map for PD 20-01. This slide shows the location of the property at 883 South Barksdale Street, southwest corner of Barksdale and Nelson. The request is for a 4-unit townhouse building or structure. The site is located in Cooper Young, and the zoning is R6 Residential Historic District. Slide 2, the next slide will be a land use map. The site is currently vacant, and the land uses within the vicinity of the site consist of single-family, multifamily, and commercial. Slides 3 and 4, the next slides, will be site photos of the area surrounding the property. The photo captions each location. Next slide, slide 5, the concept plan. If you would note, the southernmost and northernmost units are 1.5-story units to reduce the massing of the structure. The inner 2 units are both 2-story units. Additionally, each unit contains an individual garage. Next slide, which will be slide 6, the upper elevation is facing Nelson Avenue. The lower elevation is facing South Barksdale Street. Next slide would be 7 and 8. Conceptual renderings. These are photo captions. Those captions explain each photo. And these are renderings that the applicant has provided to us. Slide 9, the site history. This is a Sanborn map. The subject property outlined in red, it contains 2 buildings, 2 building footprints. One is a gasoline filling station, the old filling station type building where individuals, they come out and pump your gas for you. And the other one was a separate commercial building. Note the previous 1917 Sanborn map did not include the Barksdale in its network, in its street network. So you can see the trolley line there too as well. Slide 10, which is the next slide, site history. The historical photo, somewhere around 1930. The subject property contains the Pan Am gas station, the Gainsborough drugstore. It's adjacent to the parked car in the front. There's a parked car in front of the building. Next slide, which would be slide 11, the site history. Another Sanborn map from 1952. The subject property outlined in red shows a commercial building that expanded and replaced the filling station. If you note, the subject property actively contained commercial structures from 1920 to 2014, when the commercial structure had most recently been used as a grocery and convenience store. That store was demolished. Next slide, which would be slide 12, Memphis 3.0 slide. This proposal is consistent with the Memphis 3.0 plan. It meets the criteria because it's in the nurture anchor neighborhood, which allows increased density, and the request is consistent with the scale and building height descriptions of the anchor neighborhood, primarily single unit neighborhood. Slide 13, there are conclusions. The applicant is requesting a 4-unit townhouse structure. The development would promote infill development The subject property is located within Cooper-Young, which is the local historic district. The building's elevations are subject to review by landmarks. On June 11, 2020, this body heard and approved this request. However, this case was subject to a resolution that remanded it back to the board. The proposed development would not unduly injure or damage the use, value, and enjoyment of surrounding property, nor unduly hinder or prevent the development of surrounding property in accordance with the current development code. The location and arrangements of structures, parking areas, walking, lighting, and other service facilities are compatible with surrounding properties. There's a graphic here that also shows opposition to and also support of. Next slide, slide 14, a recommendation of approval with the outline plan conditions. Those outline plan conditions are listed on pages 25 and 26 of the staff report. Madam Chairman, I believe that ends my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barker.
Thank you, ma'am.
Board members, anyone have any questions for Mr. Barker before we go to the applicant? Okay, if the applicant is present, would you go ahead and make your presentation, please? And we do have opposition.
Okay, my name is Niraj Kumar. I'm the architect for the project, and the developer is Aspen Developer, and Mr. Wasif Duik is also present for this meeting. I would like to thank everybody for giving me opportunity to speak again. This is our third land use control meeting appearance for this case. When we came in back in May, when the neighborhood meeting was waived. However, it was requested that we go to the neighborhood meeting, which we did, and we came back to the Land Use Control Board in June meeting, and our application was approved. However, due to new City Council regulations, we were asked to have another neighborhood meeting, which we did on June 29th, and today we are back on the third time, and I'm very excited, and we are hoping that we will go to the next step after this land use control meeting. So please go to the next slide. So like I said, we had our first neighborhood meeting on June 3rd, and then we have the second neighborhood meeting on June 29th, and we had first meeting we had 20 plus neighbors, and then in second month we have I think a similar number of neighbors attended the meeting. Next slide, please. So the majority of concern from the neighbors was the architectural character of our design, and also the volume and massing and the density. And we have been working with them, and we have done every effort, to my mind, to address those issues. There are a couple of minor issues which we think when we work with landmark commissions, we're going to address those issues. Anyway, those are like turning radius to the garage and the second car parking on the street, landscaping, and those kind of items. Next slide, please. So this slide shows some of the houses in the neighborhood, so that you can see the character and the architectural style. Almost all of them have the front porch with extended carport. You can see also they have a knee wall with the brick and dormers, and majority of them, they are like 1.5 story in the front, and as they go back, they have 2 stories. Next slide, please. So our effort, when we came here first time with the Land Use Control Board, our design, you can see on the left-hand side, that design was more look like a multifamily exterior. However, there was concern from the neighbors, regarding the massing and volume. So what we did is that we brought the volume down, we brought the massing down, and we tried to disguise this architecture. It's more look like a single family. So now on the right-hand side, you can see that we have brick, we have the front porch, like you see any house in this neighborhood, most of them, and also you see on the left-hand side slide. We had distinct entrance to each unit. We have 4 units, and we cut it down. Now we have just 1 porch on the Boxdale side, so it looks more like a single family rather than a multi-family unit. Next slide, please. And this is the rendering on the Google Maps, so you can see exactly how the building will look like once it's built. and this is the view from the Boston and Nelson Street. Next slide, please. And this is what you see from the Boxtel. And like I said, on the Boxtel side, we used to have like four porch. We combined into one, just so that it look more like a single family. And also you can see the volume in the front and the back. We have decreased it to 1.5 story, and in the middle it's like 2 story. Next slide, please. And this is the elevations, and also you can see the porch, which is extended from the, all the way in the front, and we have a car extended back on the western side to a carport. Next slide, please. And this is what just showing our transitions from what we used to have. We used to have like all four units 2 story on the site, and we change it to front and the back to 1.5 story. So it more, it's more looks like what you see in the neighborhood. Next slide, please. This is the site plan. So you can see there was another question that came about the density and the footprint. And so I can say, you see in the slides presented by Mr. Baucus, there used to be a commercial grocery store and a second building on the site. Our current plan is has a smaller footprint what it used to be. You can see we have plenty of green space and open space on all the 4 sides. On the west side, you see that's one-way alley, which is for access to the garage for each unit. Next slide, please. And this is the view for, I think there's two more development in this area, which is under construction, or they already done. They also are multifamily units on the single-family lot. Next slide, please. And like we are proposing to have the second car park on the street, which is again very consistent with what you see in the neighborhood. These are a couple of views showing how the cars are parked on the street. Next slide, please. And this is my last slide here. This also shows a photograph of some of the intersections. You can see the houses which are 2-story, and there also is a church. So we try to be very consistent than what we see. I think this is an ideal site for the multifamily, just because it's on the corner lot, and the Boxtel is a wider street that will allow for on-street parking without any problem. You can also see we have lots of open space, and our footprint is even smaller than what it used to be before when there was a commercial development on this project, on this site. So with that, I'm concluding my presentations. I request the Land Use Control Board to approve the application. It just creates more options to the new home buyers who wants to live in this area. It's also a vacant site, so it's going to promote the infill development. It's going to also make the space neighborhood safer, more lively, and bring activity to this corner lot. And it's our proposal is consistent with the Memphis 3-year general plan. With that, I conclude, and I request Land Use Control Board to approve our application so we can move to the next step. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. Did you give us your address, please?
My address is 1255 Linfield Road, Suite 259, Memphis, Tennessee 38119.
Thank you. Okay, board members, anybody have any questions for Mr. Kumar at this time? Hearing none, we are ready for the opposition, and I believe Mr. Ragsdale is going to call out the name, and the opposers, please give your name and address. Repeat your name and give us your address, please. Mr. Ragsdale?
Yes, Madam Chair, I wanted to mention that we had several people signed up for in opposition. We do have, it appears, 5 of those on here, so just so that they know the amount of time that they have. So, and the first one we have is Miss Olivia Wall, and she is unmuted.
Okay, Ms. Wall, can you give us your address? And you have about 2 minutes.
I'm representing the Cooper Young Community Association Development Committee located at 2298 Young Avenue. Thank you for hearing from the Cooper Young Community Association again on this matter. Although this project has previously been approved, we respectfully urge you to reconsider that decision. 4 units is inappropriate for this lot, both in terms of land use and design. This lot is less than 10,000 square feet in the middle of a primarily single-unit neighborhood. As it stands, this project does not meet Cooper Young's landmarks guidelines, but does that matter here? It matters because the applicant is presenting you with a plan that cannot be built in order to address land use issues. For example, the parking. They are required to have a certain number of on-site parking spots for each unit. However, the parking as proposed does not meet the guidelines, and providing adequate parking for 4 units will be nearly impossible. What good is it to approve a land use that cannot feasibly be built? We do not want this lot to be vacant. We just want something appropriate. This project has significant opposition regarding the massing and number of units. Please consider rejecting this application or amending this proposal to reduce that number to 2, which would be more appropriate both in the neighborhood and on this lot. Thank you for your time. That concludes my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. Any questions of Ms. Wall? Board members? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Ragsdale, the next person.
Yes, Madam Chair, we have Brett Ammons on, and he's unmuted.
Hello, my name is Brett Ammons. I live at 1914 Oliver Avenue, across Barksdale from this project. Thank you for hearing this case again. And again, in opposition to this project, I believe that the massing of the building, there's no other residential buildings in the area that occupy the entire site as this building does. And also the number of units there, as far as 4 units, it's just far too many units for that building. And that will be the end of my comments. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mr. Ammons. Any questions from the board members? Okay, hearing none. We're asking for the questions while they're unmuted. Okay, next, Mr. Ragsdale.
Yes, Mr. Ward Archer is on and unmuted.
Mr. Archer, please give us your address.
Yes, my name is Ward Archer. I'm at 1902 Nelson Avenue. I am the next door neighbor to this project, if you will. I have a 100-year-old plus building that sits on the corner of Barksdale and Nelson. This project is grossly out of scale, out of character, overly dense, and is unattractive and overwhelmingly not supported by the neighborhood. I've yet to meet a neighbor who's excited about this project. If approved, this development will have a far worse effect, in my opinion, than the vacant lot that exists there now. It just doesn't fit. You can just look at the pictures and see. And I would like to ask that you deny this project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Archer. Any questions? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Ragsdale?
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr. June West is on and unmuted.
Thank you. June West, 2282 Madison Avenue, Memphis Heritage. Thank you so much again. I appreciate this case being reheard, and I, like Ward Archer said, would like to voice a concern on the part of not only Cooper Young, but other historic neighborhoods that are having this same issue, and that is setting precedent on multiplying single-family neighborhoods into multi-family neighborhoods. I am not opposed to density. We are not opposed to new development. We just feel that this is much too large a development program for this corner. And my concern is that it sets a precedent moving forward. People have purchased their homes in Cooper Young based on design, feeling, sense of place, and this changes that. I would say a duplex might be a really good alternative to this site development, and with that, I'll conclude my comments.
Thank you. Ms. West? Any questions, board members? Okay, hearing none, we need the next person in opposition, Mr. Ragsdale.
Yes, Mr. Charles Belinkie is on and unmuted.
Mr. Belinkie, your address? Mr. Belinkie?
Hello, my name is Charles Belenke. My address is 5019 Welshire Avenue. I have very little to add except that I think that the public hearing that was required by the City Council had so many technical issues in terms of people being able to participate that it ought to be redone and this matter held over to have a public hearing either in person or without as many technical glitches. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Belinkie? All right, hearing none, do we have anybody else in opposition, Mr. Ragsdale?
No, Madam Chair, we don't have anyone else on the line that signed up in opposition.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we are ready for the rebuttal from the applicant, if any. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, Mike. Okay, this is Architect Niraj Kumar again. My response to the volume and mass. You see on my slide, now our new design, it doesn't look like anything different than what you see in the neighborhood. I don't agree with that. In the volume and mass, it is very appropriate. Also, at the same time, you know, what it used to be there on that site, we have a smaller footprint now, and there's other multifamily infill housing in this neighborhood, and we are very much consistent with what you see. A couple of new infill housing has been come up in the neighborhood. Regarding the neighborhood meeting, like I said, it was waived, and but on the request of Land Use Control Board, we did the first neighborhood meeting. I don't see there was any glitch, and then because of the resolution, we went again, and we did the second neighborhood meeting, and our current design is also the outcome of some of the comments we received. So I do not agree with the positions, and I'm more than happy to work with them as we go forward. This is the application for land use, and the design, we can still have to work with landmark and the neighbors. So that's conclude my my defense, and I have Mr. Wasif, if you would like to see his developer, I'd like to speak.
Mr. Wasif, would you like to speak?
Madam Chair, he is not on the line anymore. I don't know if he got disconnected.
Okay, any questions from the board for Mr. Kumar prior to closing this public portion of the meeting? Any questions of Mr. Kumar? Okay, hearing none, we are going to close the public portion of our meeting on this agenda. Dr. Pritchard, would you like to make a motion?
Move approval of agenda item number 1, PD 20-01, Cooper Young.
Second.
Okay, that was a second by Ms. O'Connell or Ms. Wilbank?
Wilbank. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. All right, is there any discussion?
Madam Chair.
Chairwoman.
Yes.
Go ahead, Dr. Pritchard.
Just wanted to say that Ward Archer gave very succinct reasons as to why this is not a good site for this project, and wanted to second his comments.
Okay, anybody else? I heard somebody else wanted to discuss.
Yes, Madam Chair, this is Scott Fleming. I had a question for Mr. Bacchus. Could you clarify the parking requirements for this use, please?
Well, it's Brian Bacchus, OPD. Thank you, Mr. Fleming, for asking that question because it was brought up with the opposition. These are, I believe, one-bedroom units, and any unit that has one bedroom, the parking requirement is one parking space.
Okay, thank you. And it appears as if those are accounted for in the garage that's accessed along the alleyway on the back. Okay. So that alleyway is not intended to be parked in. It's just an access point for each of the 4 units, correct?
That's correct. Absolutely.
Okay,
that's
thank
correct. The parking, it meets the parking requirement for the zoning code. And any surplus parking, I would imagine, would be in the or guest parking would be in the alley, as well as along the public street.
Right. Understood. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bacchus.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I assume we're ready to vote, and I think we'll vote individually.
Mr. Fleming?
No.
Mr. Gibb?
Yes.
Lyles Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon?
Yes.
Ms. O'Connell?
Yes.
Can't hear you. You're breaking up. I didn't hear anybody after Ms. Wilbanks.
Okay, I have Ms. O'Connell as a yes. That was the last person I called. Can you hear me better?
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Pritchard?
No.
Mr. Thomas? Mr. Thomas? Ms. Wilbanks?
Yes.
Chair Sharp?
No.
I'm going to try one more time. Mr. Thomas? Okay, we have 5 ayes and 3 nays.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much.
Agenda item number 2, PD 20-04, Whitehaven, redevelopment of Graves Elementary at 3398 Graves Street to a 3D printing and production operation with an ancillary vocational technical training facility. Staff recommendation is rejection.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant here?
Excuse me, Chairman
Yes.
Sharp.
Yes.
They had muted me again. I was saying yes, but no one was hearing me, and I just heard them. They just unmuted me again. I don't know why I got muted again. All right?
So it was 6 yeses and 3 noes. So the motion carries.
Thank you, Dad. Got it.
Thank you. All right. Case number 2, is the applicant present? Case number 2, is the applicant present? We do have opposition, so we'll hear the case. Do we hear the case or wait to see if the applicant is present? Mr. Whitehead?
Madam Chair, I do believe the applicant is present. We're trying to get them unmuted at this point. You can give us 2 seconds.
Well, I think as long as the applicant is...
Excuse me, I'm sorry. This is Aaron Minchak. Am I the applicant? I'm sorry, I don't have an agenda in front of me.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have opposition, so we'll hear the case.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Brian Bacchus again with the Office of Planning and Development. I'm presenting this case to you this morning on behalf of my colleague, again, Mr. Jeffrey Penzas. Case number is PD 2004. The applicant is Made in Memphis LLC. Location of the project is 3398 Graves Road in the Whitehaven community. It is south of Brooks Road, just north of Mitchell Road. On the east side of Graves, the request is for limited light industrial uses with the intent of operating a 3D printing and production operation, which would create customizable jewelry, collectibles, and other memorabilia with an ancillary vocational technical training facility. The site, as you can see by the zoning map, is R10 residential zoning. R8 is to the west, and also some RU3 farther west of the property. The site is adjacent on the north by a single-family residential, and as well as to the east and south. Slide 2, land use map. Next slide, please. This is a land use map. You can see the surrounding land uses are single-family residential to the east, south, and west, and institutional place of worship to the north. Next slide, please. Slides 3, 4, and these site photos are photos of the surrounding property. The photo captions explain each. You can see the top photo here is the actual Graves Elementary, and these other photos are of the same lot. This is a very large lot, which was built for a elementary school. As you can see, the bottom photo are single-family homes on the east side of Gill Road, I believe. That's correct. Next slide. McCorkle, I'm sorry. Next slide. The additional photos of the property from Graves Road, and then on the bottom photo is the northern boundary of the property from McCorkle Road looking west. Next slide, please. Revised another photo here at Winchester Road, subject property looking southwest. This is along, I believe, McCorkle Road on the north side of Mitchell. Next slide for the revised concept plan. This is the newly revised concept plan that was presented at the neighborhood meeting. Next slide. Shows the layout of the building, its setbacks, parking, and circulation. The renderings and elevations for slides 9 and 10. These slides are conceptual renderings and elevations. As you can see, they're maintaining the open space area in the rear. It's similar to, appears to be similar to a larger school. I believe the parking will remain in place and the access and circulation will remain in place. There is, this is a rendering of aerial 3D view from above, which shows you how this property will lay out on the property and with the design concept. Next slide. This slide shows a 1 mile radius. These are elevations. These are a view from Graves as well as a view from McCorkle. These are from residential sides of the property. Be looking into the property as well as these single-family homes along along Graves and McCorkle Road will be looking directly into the property. Next slide, please. This is a 1 mile radius. The next slide will show a 1 mile radius map that indicates there are several instances of vacant land that is industrially zoned for EMP or either light industrial or heavy industrial within a 1 mile radius of the property. Next slide. The Memphis 3.0, the request does not meet the Memphis 3.0 because 3D printing, light manufacturing is not considered an institutional use. However, the applicant has stated they will intend to partner with the Shelby County schools to provide vocational and technical training. Vocational technical training school would be considered an institutional use, and therefore it's possible the development, or at least part of it, could be considered consistent. On the other hand, even under this scenario, the principal use of the facility would be manufacturing, while the vocational use would be ancillary. Next slide, we come to our conclusions, and the subject property is bounded by single-family residential. And locating a 3D printing facility with ancillary vocational training school at this site would create a less than ideal situation for the residents of this neighborhood. The impact of the day-to-day operations for light manufacturing may be considered imprudent at this location. It would adversely affect the quality of life, the surrounding neighborhood, despite the applicant's proposed design and limitations imposed on the conditions by staff. Furthermore, there are several instances of vacant land that's industrially zoned, located within a 1 mile radius. May 14th, this body heard and approved this request. However, this case was affected by an approved resolution by the council, which is remanding this project back to the board to be heard again. The proposed development may be unduly injure or damage the use and value of the enjoyment of the surrounding area, unduly hinder or prevent development of the surrounding property in accordance with the development plans for the city and county. Location and arrangement of structures, parking areas, walks, lighting, and other service facilities may not be compatible with the surrounding land uses. The next slide is our recommendation, and Madam Chairman, members of the board, we're recommending rejection of this application. However, if approved, staff recommends the approved conditions, which are listed on pages 23 through 26 of the staff report. Madam Chairman, that's all I have. That's in my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that the board have of me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bacchus. Any questions from the board at this time for Mr. Bacchus? Okay, hearing none, we're ready for the applicant, and I see quite a few applicants and or supporters, so if Mr. Ragsdale will call out who's going to be...
Can I ask a question?
Yes, of Mr. Bacchus.
This is Darrell Thomas. Mr. Bacchus, if this is rejected, will that building, the current structure, be torn down?
I think if this is rejected, I believe the building will remain in place, and I think the Shelby County Schools still own the building. So I'm not sure what their schedule is. It's a possibility it could be demolished.
It'll remain vacant? Okay.
Yes,
okay,
it probably will remain vacant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're ready for the applicant to make your 10-minute presentation, and I see quite a few applicants and or supporters, so I don't know if one is going to speak for all or more than one is going to speak, so if we could...
Madam Chair, we only have one applicant that is actually on the phone. It's Mr. Weinschenker, and so he is unmuted, and so if he would like to speak now, he's ready to go.
Okay. You're ready, Mr. Weinfinger, and we'd like your address, please.
Sure. It's 603 Sweetland Avenue, Hillside, New Jersey, 07205.
Okay.
I am the developer. I'm also the majority partner of Graceland Enterprises and Elvis Presley Enterprises. And to date, we have done over $140 million in development in Whitehaven. That's been responsible for more than 300 new jobs. And I think we've done it quite responsibly. And this is and I apologize, I don't remember the gentleman's name that brought it up initially, but this is an opportunity, a once-in-a-generation opportunity, not only to get rid of a blighted building. The school in its current state is a fire hazard. There had been a fire in there, is dangerous. There had been several full gun clips that had been found recently in the building. It has asbestos in the building, and there is no money in any blighted fund or in the Shelby County education to pay for it. So this is, we have done, we have the same type of situation in New Jersey where we have in a very nice residential neighborhood, light manufacturing. 3D printing is 21st century technology. And it's not something that's going to be a burden on the neighborhood.
Okay. Is that your presentation? Or
No,
can I not hear you?
No, the presentation's to follow. I'm just a developer.
Okay.
Madam Chair, we do have Mark Jobe on the line now, who is listed as an applicant.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Jobe, your address?
Yes, excuse me. This is Hunter Humphreys and Mark Jobe. We're both partners at the Glankler Brown Law Firm at Suite 400, 6000 Poplar Avenue, Memphis. We represent the applicant, Made in Memphis, LLC. Joel Weinshanker, who you just heard from, is the sole member of Made in Memphis, LLC, and he obviously has joined the call. We were, for whatever reason, not connected until just a minute ago, so we did not have an opportunity to make the initial comments, but we're going to do so now.
Okay.
Before turning the applicant's presentation over to Mark Jobe, I wanted to briefly provide some background on the application status.
Okay, who's speaking?
This is Hunter Humphreys.
Okay, and your address?
I just gave my address.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All right. And Mark Jobe, my partner, is with me, same address. This application was originally filed with OPD. As previously noted, the neighborhood meeting requirement was waived by OPD based on the governor and the mayor's orders related to COVID-19. Notices of the May 14 Land Use Control Board meeting were posted and also sent to neighbors. The application was presented previously to Land Use Control Board on May 14. The application was presented, and after much input and discussion by interested parties, the application was approved on May 14 by Land Use Control Board. As also previously noted, the City Council then requested the applicant to conduct a neighborhood meeting and then request a second approval from Land Use Control Board. A neighborhood meeting was, after appropriate notice, was held on June 29th. There was substantial participation in that meeting, and all concerns of the participants were comprehensively addressed by the applicant. We're now back before Land Use Control Board to request ratification of the prior approval by Land Use Control Board of this application, and I'd like to turn this over to Mark Jobe, who will make the applicant's presentation.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to turn your attention to the staff report. The slides that were presented in the neighborhood meeting are included. Starting on page 49 is a letter from Southwest Tennessee Community College, whereby the applicant and Southwest Tennessee have begun discussions and entered a letter of intent, essentially, to go forward with this project. As you can see by the following pictures, this building is currently extremely blighted. There are openings throughout the building. The portables are open. It's clear that negative activity is happening, and there's been, from what we know, no application since 2014 when the school closed to repurpose this building or bring it back to life. Like Joel said, there's asbestos in the building, and the demolition will be expensive and will have to be done, with proper environmental concerns and following those guidelines. We have revised since our last meeting. We've provided updated concept plans showing that the building will not be some sort of skyscraper or factory with smokestacks and billowing coal smoke. This will be a clean, low-impact light manufacturing facility. It's a 3D printing is a new technology that was not considered at the time the UDC was written. All commercial delivery activity will be off of Winchester Road. It should be noted that less than about a half mile away, there's FedEx Freight and the headquarters for a railroad company. Even closer to that, immediately behind the houses on Graves, there's a trucking facility, it looks like, that's essentially a gravel pit. So this area is already subject to many mixed uses, some more intense than the others. But again, the applicant has proposed something that will bring this property back to life, that will have an educational aspect within walking distance of the community. The building will have a similar aesthetic to an educational facility and similar to what exists there today, except that it will be much better and brand new and well maintained. The issues raised in the neighborhood meeting primarily revolve around parking, increased traffic and activity, emissions, and then landscaping and green space along with the footprint of the building. We believe that all of these can be adequately addressed in conditions on this planned development. Since the last meeting, we've increased the parking from 143 spaces to I believe around 168. We're under contract to purchase this property, so if we can't do this land use, then we won't continue on with all of the investigations, but we will have to submit a traffic and engineering investigation to make sure that that this use can be, held on this site and we will provide adequate parking per the code. The neighbors voiced concerns about increased traffic. We would show that any actual use of this property will increase traffic from what's there today. The commercial activity and commercial traffic will all be off of Winchester. There will be limited pickup and deliveries for this use. It's not something that will require a steady flow of commercial trucks delivering off of Winchester. We also would show that this is a clean technology, a green technology that will not produce any emissions and should not have, and there's an effect on the community. There is conditions in our plan development that require no noise, odors, or other emissions from the use, and we believe that adequate green space is being maintained, and that the additional landscaping will make this site an asset to the community and bring it back to life. And with that, we respectfully request approval of this, and we would state that the proposed conditions with respect to use by the OPD are too narrow. One example is that it was originally thought that we were going to partner with Shelby County Schools. Now it looks like that partnership will be with Southwest Tennessee Community College. But again, the primary use, and it's completely necessary for the vote tech and training aspect, is that of light manufacturing that will be a low-impact 3D printing center. So with that, we respectfully request approval of this application.
Thank you very much. Board members, do you have any questions of Mr. Joe? Hearing none, I assume we're ready to hear from the opposition. Mr. Ragsdale, if you would call their names respectively. We have 6 on our paper here, but I don't know how many are here to oppose.
Yes, Madam Chair, it appears we have all 6 on the line, and the first one that we have unmuted is Ms. Holly Jansen Fulkerson.
Hi, this is Holly Jansen Fulkerson. I am the director of Memphis Heritage, and we are at 2282 Madison Avenue. Typically, Memphis Heritage speaks at these meetings because we disagree with the staff's recommendation, but today we are speaking because we absolutely agree with their recommendation to reject this application. This type of development is just completely inappropriate in this residential neighborhood, and there are plenty of other places that this facility could be located. Whitehaven residents and their supporters from many neighborhoods have spoken by the hundreds in opposition of this project, and we urge the board to strongly consider these factors when making their decisions today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fulkerson. Board members, any questions? Any questions of Ms. Fulkerson? Okay, hearing none, who is the next speaker, Mr. Ragsdale?
Mr. Gordon Alexander.
Mr. Alexander.
Hi, it's Gordon Alexander. I'm the head of the Midtown Action Coalition. I completely concur with the comments of Holly Fulkerson of Memphis Heritage. This is not an appropriate development for this neighborhood. There are plenty of light industrial sites in the area to put this. It's completely inappropriate. Does not coincide with Memphis 3.0. It does not follow the guidelines and codes and rules that OPD follows, and it certainly does not coincide with 99 9/10% of the residents of the neighborhood. And I'd like to point out that one of the presenters pointed out that the guidelines used by OPD were inappropriate. That's really not his position to question what guidelines and what rules and regulations the city of Memphis follows. Please reject this application. The staff recommendation is rejection. Most projects are green lighted by OPD if you go back the last 9 or 10 years. If OPD is in opposition to a project, it must be a pretty ill-advised project to begin with. Thank you very much.
Mr. Alexander, if you would give us your address, please.
I'm sorry, it's 179 South Rembert Street.
Okay, thank you. Board members, any questions of Mr. Alexander? Hearing none, Mr. Ragsdale, could you introduce the next speaker, please?
Yes, Madam Chair, Ms. Yvonne Nelson.
Ms. Nelson, your address, please.
My name is Dr. Yvonne D. Nelson, and I live at 3519 McCorkle Road. Good morning, and thank you for allowing us the opportunity to speak before you again today. We live here, and we do not agree with this use. Does our voices not matter? The Whitehaven Community Development Corporation has issues with this planned development, which has morphed several times and continues to change as of today with the number of increased parking spaces announcement. Since being announced in November 2019, the changes are ever coming, but we stand firm in saying this applicant brings an unwanted use into the heart of our community. Shelby County Schools had scheduled for the building to be demolished by Memphis Wrecking Company for $294,500 in June of 2019. So we also want to know, why is it still standing? Please vote to place this facility in an area already zoned for this type of activity. We do not want nor deserve a factory in our front doors. EPE, doing business as made in Memphis, does not display good corporate citizenship in keeping their promises, and we did not have a neighborhood meeting that met the standards required on Monday, June 29th at noon. There is no firm agreement for a vote tech center in place. Furthermore, a total of 62 letters and 1 week's notice is not giving adequate notice. That meeting prevented people from hearing what was being said, and others were unable to log in. Attorney Job was admonished by Councilman Ford for trying to squelch the voices of those who were in the meeting electronically and physically. And although we believe a meeting was not held, that is, it is unfair to go forward today. We are agreeing to do so, but under protest. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Any questions of Dr. Nelson? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Ragsdale?
Ms. Estelle Martin is on and unmuted.
My name is Estelle Martin, and I live at 3304 Boulevard Drive. I'm opposed to changing the existing zoning in R10 residential single family to light industrial. The OPD rejected this plan, and for what I understand, that is their job to know what is better and more compatible to put in an area. And to the applicant, we are already have life in our community, and we fight every day for that. Every entrance into this building will be in front of residential homes from Winchester, from Graves, and from McCorkle. This is mostly a senior citizen community, and we live here every day. And what I am most afraid of is this company will come in and start in at one time in 2 or 3 years. Here we go again, needing to expand. Every company that starts a business expects to expand. What do we do in the community now? Are you beginning to buy more land? Are you beginning to cut the trees down? Our neighborhood is not even equipped for this. So I'm asking you to please do not vote for this because of high traffic in our area, more pollution, our property value decrease. So please vote no for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Any questions of Ms. Martin from the board? Hearing none, we're ready for our next speaker.
Miss Marilyn Carruthers is on.
Thank you very much. My name is Marilyn Carruthers. My home address is 3380 McCorkle Road for 33 years. I am appalled that a 2-story factory would be built in our front yards. We have no idea what to expect from this factory, especially since this project has been called several things, such as a 3D printing facility, vocational tech training facility, and a light manufacturing facility. And I have other concerns. Please vote no. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Carruthers. Any questions for Ms. Carruthers? Hearing none, we're ready for the, I'm assuming, last speaker, Mr. Belinkie. Mr. Ragsdale, do we have another speaker?
You're correct. It's Mr. Belinkie, and he is unmuted. And he is the last speaker.
Hello, this is Charles Belinkie. My address is 5019 Welshire Avenue. I join with the others in their reasons for opposing this project. I would also point out that creeping industrialization is the wrong approach. If planning wants to consider rezoning this entire neighborhood industrial, they should go ahead and do it. But to piecemeal one and another, leaving the existing residents stranded is not the way that zoning should be conducted. This is an example of what's called spot zoning. If you look at page 49 of the staff report, the letter from Southwest Community College contains no specifics. We have the same issue that was raised the last time that was before us, which is whether these students will be paid at all, or isn't this just an attempt for Elvis Presley Enterprise to get their products made by not paying wages or paying substandard wages, rather than bringing in the kind of jobs this community needs that would allow people to live in the community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Belinkie. Board members, any questions for Mr. Belinkie? Hearing none, I'm assuming the applicant is ready for their rebuttal. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, this is Hunter Humphreys, and I want to respond on behalf of the applicant. We have provided in detail responses to each of the concerns. This facility is going to be a campus-like setting. As previously noted by OPD, it's a very large piece of land. A substantial additional landscaping is going to be provided. Additional parking is going to be provided so that there will not be any need for off-site, on-street parking. Concerns about the traffic have been fully addressed, and one additional point on that is when we talk about deliveries and pickups at this facility, we have been told that there possibly would be 1 or 2 FedEx or other deliveries a day, and possibly 1 or 2 pickups, all of which would occur from Winchester. So traffic is not and should not be an issue. This facility is going to create jobs, and contrary to what the speaker said a minute ago, these jobs are going to pay a minimum of $15 an hour. There's also going to be the vocational training, which is going to equip students for future employment in this or some other location of this modern industry. And what I'd like to also point out is the alternatives. As previously noted, this building has been empty since 2014. It's deteriorated. It is an eyesore. It provides numerous hazardous conditions for all residents of the area. It will at some point need to be demolished, but at this point, and since 2014, to our knowledge, there have been no other alternatives proposed, and the outlook for city, county, or other governmental entities with the budget deficits and major budget issues in the near future, it's extremely doubtful that the government or private industry is going to come in and want to do anything with this property. So there are no other alternatives out there. You either have a building that's crumbling and dangerous, hazardous, or you have a productive facility that does not adversely affect the neighborhood. I'd also point out that we have talked with numerous leaders, and one who we spoke with recently, Mr. Weinshanker did, is Beverly Robertson, the chair of the Chamber of Commerce, and she has indicated that she's a strong supporter of this facility. And one final comment, and that is that Mr. Weinshanker has had and does have opportunities to locate this facility at other locations, but he is a strong supporter of Whitehaven and wants this located in Whitehaven to create jobs and opportunities for the citizens of Whitehaven. So this is a project that should and could be approved and is clearly a benefit to the Whitehaven community and the entire city of Memphis. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humphreys. Board members, you have any questions for Mr. Humphreys? Do you have any questions for Mr. Humphreys? Okay. Hearing none, I will now close the public portion of this particular case and/or item on the agenda. Are you ready, Dr. Pritchard, to make a motion? But prior to making the motion, Mr. Whitehead, would you explain how our voting goes in the positive manner? Or somebody explain?
Yes, can you hear me a little better this time?
Yes.
Okay, I switched. So all our motions are made in the affirmative. So a yes vote would be for the application as conditioned by staff.
Okay, you
so
went in
even
and
though
out.
staff is,
you broke up again.
Well, AT&T and Verizon both get Fs. I was hoping one would be better.
Well,
so,
maybe Dr. can explain it on her mic since she's got to make the most.
Well, this is a little confusing. I'm sorry. Can you hear me a little better now?
Yes.
Okay, so even though staff is recommending rejection, we have offered conditions. So a motion will be made in the affirmative, and a yes vote would be in favor of the project, but as conditioned by staff, unless the body votes to amend those conditions.
Okay, now I'm confused. Okay. If we vote yes, we're voting in favor of the rejection?
No.
I'm sorry.
No, for
I'll
the
let
project.
Libby try.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Everybody got that?
Yes. Can I make a comment about this project? This is Darrell Thomas.
Well, we make it after we make the motion and get ready for discussion.
Okay. That's
all right.
Fine. Okay, thank you.
All right, Madam Chair, move
Yes.
approval of agenda item number 2, PD 20-04.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded. Do we have any discussion? I
Yes,
heard something to discuss.
This is Daryl Thomas. This is one that I want to support both sides. The project is an excellent project, just needs to be somewhere else, because I wouldn't want this in my front door either, in a residential area. That's the only part with this. So for that reason, I would have to vote no to this. But it is a great project, and if Whitehaven has to lose this one, it has to go to somewhere else in the city of Memphis. I still think it's a worthy project to have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any more discussion? Anybody else want to say anything on the board?
Hey, this is J.C. McKenna. Daryl, I really second what you said. I do feel strongly about it. I don't think it 3D printing immenses a lot of gases or anything like that, but I just, I definitely understand the residents of the Whitehaven community and how they feel about it, and walking out, having this, right in front of you. I think if it was more of a vocational, educational thing for the principal use, I think it would make a lot of more sense. But for that reason, I'm gonna have to say no to the to it as well.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'm assuming we're ready to vote, and we will take an individual vote.
Ms. Wilbanks.
Yes.
Mr. Thomas.
No.
Dr. Pritchard.
No.
Ms. O'Connell.
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon.
No.
Vice Chair Lyles Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Gill.
Yes.
Mr. Fleming.
Yes.
Madam Chair.
No.
That's 5 ayes, 4 nays.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. Dr. Pritchard?
Madam Chair, our last item is agenda item number 6, SUP 09-217CO Bolton, 5-year time extension for a sand and gravel mining operation known as 10577 Millington Arlington Road in TDEC records, municipally addressed as 10769 Millington Arlington Road. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions.
Thank you very much. Is the applicant present? Is the applicant present? Hello?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do have two applicants.
Okay,
Alan
yeah.
Parks and Homer Branham.
Okay, then we have opposition, so we will hear the case. Mr. Balkus?
Good morning, Madam Chairman. Again, Brian Bacchus, Office of Planning and Development, presenting this case to you on behalf of my colleague, Mr. Jeffrey Penzas. As you can see on your YouTube video, we have SUP 09217CZ County, Memphis Stone and Gravel, also known as MSG. The location of the property is 10577 Millington Arlington Road. This is for a special use permit request for a 5-year time extension. The location of the property as shown is in the Bolton neighborhood in the unincorporated Shelby County, far east Shelby County. Next slide, please. These slides, aerials, slides 2 through 7 are aerial images. These slides can be scrolled through, and these slides are site references for aerials of the subject property and the adjacent sites owned by Memphis Stone and Gravel that can have all been previously approved by the county for gravel mining operations. The white stars on each area indicate the adjacent mining sites, and the pink stars indicate the subject site. Slide 8, which is the zoning map. This property is outlined in orange. indicated by a pink star. The site and the surrounding area is zoned conservation agricultural, as you can see on the graphic. The land use map, next slide please, there's a subject property indicated, and the subject site is surrounded by vacant land and single-family homes also in conservation agricultural districts, 2 acre minimum. These are your typical lots in Shelby County. Slides 10 through 14, these are site photos. The slides contain photos from the subject property, which also show compliance with conditions relating to the buffers of the previously approved special permit. The slide 15 is the mining plan. These are the mining plans. These are, continue with the next slide, please. Yes, this is the mining plan for the property. The larger stone and gravel site that includes the subject property, which is outlined in pink. And note the eastern area nearest the Arlington Way subdivision has already been mined. Slide 16, next slide, please. Next slide is the site plan. The site plan shows mainly the buffered areas along the eastern side of the property. The various buffers include berms, fencing, and non-disturbance areas at various points. Keep in mind, berms are mounds of dirt that have slopes to them. They are very high in elevation. These prevent views directly into the property. Slide 17 is slight history, which is the next slide, please. The highlighted text, as you can see, the Shelby County Board of Commissioners approved the resolution granting the special permit for sand and gravel January 11th, 2010. You can see this on page 35 through 44 of the staff report, 41, of the staff report and the resolution. Furthermore, condition 18 states that the proposed special permit shall be valid for 10 years from the date when the state approved or received, which occurred on August 10th, 2010. So this request is to continue, is for a time extension. The state approved, the state approval in the special use permit having been implemented within the required 24-month time period, the zoning code. So the application is was in effect at the time. Next slide, which is slide 18, the history continued. The reference partially related to obtaining a use of occupancy permit equating to being implemented in section 163204A would not be applicable to a mining operation, as the code enforcement does not issue use and occupancy permits for such operations. In section 1632.4b of the 1981 zoning code, this clause is not applicable to, as condition 18 defines, the time validity of said approval. And again, the Office of Construction Code Enforcement does not issue use and occupancy permits for mining operations. In essence, they're not really building anything. So slide 19, which contains our conclusions, which is should be the next slide. Thank you. The applicant is seeking a special permit, major modification for a 5-year time extension. The Shelby County Board of Commissioners approved the resolution for granting the permit for sand and gravel January 2010. Furthermore, the condition 18 states special permit shall be valid for 10 years from the date of approval, and goes on to continue the following in section 96114B. And under the UDC, special permits typically do not expire, as is the case with the most frequent application of the zoning with cell towers, hotels, car lots, and the like. Time extensions by LUCB are only required in 2 instances. One, where the conditions of approval set a specific expiration date. 2, where the use is not implemented within 24 months of approval, and which apply to latter instances. This case is an example of the former. This site is one of the 3 approved sand and gravel mining sites that abut each other. Were all individually approved by Shelby County Board of Commissioners. Next slide, it continues the conclusions of staff. the extraction and aggregate sand and gravel resources as a transitional land use that makes important contributions to the local economy, is vital to the growth and development of Shelby County. Sand and gravel are significant non-renewable resources and readily available and practically located suppliers are essential for the construction trade. Additionally, TDAC permit and plans renewal can be found on pages 40 through to 47 of the staff report. The required bond documentation can be found on the staff report on pages 48 through 49. And examples of Memphis stone and gravel sites that have been reclaimed can be found on pages 50 through 53 of the staff report. This project will not have a substantial or undue adverse effect upon the adjacent property, the character of the neighborhood, traffic conditions, parking, utility facilities, and other matters affecting the public health and welfare. Slide recommendation recommends approval with conditions. Our conditions are listed on pages 23 through 26 of the staff report. Thank you, Madam Chairman. That's all I have. There's opposition as well, and the applicant, I believe, is present. So thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have of me or staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bacchus. We have any questions for Mr. Bacchus at this time? Hearing none, we're assuming we're ready for the applicant to make their presentation. 10 minutes.
Madam Chairman, Homer Brannon, 999 South Shady Grove. I also have with me Mr. Alan Parks, who represents Memphis Stone and Gravel.
Okay.
Memphis Stone and Gravel, this is a permitted use in this Conservation Agricultural District. Memphis Stone has been in business in the city of Memphis and Shelby County since 1910. It is an old company that's been here a long time. Its sister company is Lehman Roberts, who does a lot of paving, and we probably a lot have heard of that. Memphis Stone's main plant is located to the northwest of this site on Highway 205, which is also known as Millington-Arlington Road. It's been there since 1983. And the special use permit, as Mr. Bacchus mentioned, was approved in 2009. And about that time is when we had the recession, and the amount of material extracted was cut in, about 2/3 for several years, and was not used. And so that's the reason, one of the reasons that we're asking for a 5-year extension instead of a 10-year extension. As Mr. Bacchus pointed out, it is next to some existing permits for the Duke property and the Crenshaw property, and the Duke permit would run out in 5 years, and so we would reclaim that property together. Duke and Rosenberg would be, this tract would be reclaimed together. Sand and gravel is a rare commodity, not easily found. Apparently, it was done by meanderings or tributaries of the Mississippi River maybe millions of years ago. You can find some in Tipton County, and then it goes kind of south, east of Millington, down to Highway 64, where Wolf Chase Mall is. In fact, Sam's is where it is now located across the street, is the site of one of the areas that were reclaimed and then put back to a use. As the staff pointed out, it's an interim use of the property. It swung down Germantown Road. There was a site there that is now a very large apartment complex. It went down through Walnut Grove and Sanga, which is now a single-family subdivision. A leg of it went out to Collierville, right through the middle of it, and there is an operation, I think by standard, still going on in Collierville, and it swung down through south of the airport, but there was a leg that went down Interstate 240, Linfield and Quince, behind the YMCA. There was a operation there back in the 60s when I was growing up, which I remember, and it is now a large single-family subdivision. Memphis and Shelby County needs a ready supply of this material. It helps keep prices down, that we don't have to import it from Tate County, Mississippi, where there are deposits down the interstate down into Mississippi. It is essential for construction of buildings and infrastructure, for roads, bridges, things of that nature. It is very important to have a ready supply. This material will be extracted, and then the property will be reclaimed. As Mr. Bacchus pointed out, we have supplied some information, some photos of reclaimed projects on page 50 and 53 of your staff report. And I think we even have a picture of Sam's in there. We do. And Sanga Road and the project in Collierville, and I think there's one in several other places, but it's an interim use of the property, and it's a valuable resource for our economy. We will do that and reclaim the property. We have approximately 25 employees, many of which live in this general area, and we do pay a severance tax to the state, which is used for roads and things like that. It averages about $150,000 a year, but this, we estimate the deposit on Rosenberg will probably generate about $114,000 or $115,000 in severance tax. And of course, they pay property tax, and the aggregate is in the sand is usually sold by companies that do that type of work, and there are sales tax that are generated by the product too. In conclusion, I would like to say again, this is a permitted use with a special permit. We're out there and have been since 1983. We have 2 tracks adjacent to us that are still in use, and we're asking for some additional time to finish up and reclaim the property. We'll have to get state's approval of the reclaiming plan, and they're very, very specific about what you do, and allow you to have a lake, which many of these projects do, and you can put those lakes to good use, because we believe that this property, once it's reclaimed, can be put into a farm use. Some of this property that you see has been turned into a cattle farm over the years. Some of it, as we have pointed out, is turned into residential subdivisions or large single-family homes, or it could just be open space, just depending on what a new owner might want to do with the property. So we respectfully say that we agree with the staff and the conditions, but I would like to make this a comment. I had the opportunity to speak to Commissioner Mills, and she had, this was yesterday, she had several suggestions, maybe some amendments to the conditions. She suggested that we reduce the hours of operation, and I have talked to Memphis Stone, and they said instead of 6 to 7, 6 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night, but you can't operate in dark, that's what the condition says, we'll change that to 7 to 7 and only in the daytime. We would agree to that. She had a suggestion about covering of the loads. There's a state law that says, that controls that. And we could not require trucks that are coming in from other businesses to pick up things to have a cover on it. But we do not load a truck above the freeboard to try to keep anything from spilling out. I couldn't agree to that. But we also, it was suggested that the time be reduced for the extension of this permit, and what we discussed with her was
Madam Chair,
that
the applicant has 30 seconds.
yes, ma'am. What we agreed to was, or discussed, if the board would like, is that the time would be amended to start the extraction within 2 years, and that after the extraction occurs, it will be completed in 2 years, which will reduce the time from 5 years down. And we thought that was a good suggestion, and we would agree to that if the board feels so. I would like to point out real quickly, I know I only have time, that we have received very recently letters of support from Kevin Bruce, Robin Payne, Mr. Griffin just sent one, and we also have letters of support from Trip Jones. These are people who live in the neighborhood, and they are in support, and I have sent that to Mr. Jeffrey for him to put in the file. I'll be glad to answer any questions. Alan, Mr. Parks is also here if anyone has a question of him.
Okay, thank you. Your time is up. Board members, do you have any questions for Mr. Brannon prior to us going forward to the opposition and prior to me calling on Mr. Whitehead to read a letter from one of the commissioners? Board members, do you have any questions of Mr. Brannon? Hearing none, Mr. Whitehead, I understand you have a letter from a commissioner you'd like to read in the opposition prior to us going straight to the speakers.
Yes, ma'am. I want to read this into the record. Mr. Brannon has addressed many of these, but this will put those final comments that he just made into perspective. Dear Mr. Whitehead, as your board deliberates on the above-mentioned case, I would like to state that I have been contacted by 2 constituents that are against the time extension and 1 constituent that is for the request. Because of this, I would like to request the extension be denied. If the application is approved, I would respectfully request the following items be added to mitigate the impact to the Bolton community. Number 1, the hours of operation be pushed back later by 1 hour. Number 2, all dump trucks be required to cover their loads. Number 3, the extension time be amended from 5 years to 2 years, period. If possible, I would like this letter read during your meeting. I will be listening, however, I will not be able to speak. As always, thank you, your staff and board members, for their dedicated service to our community. Signed, Amber Mills, Commissioner, District 1.
Thank you, Mr. Whitehead. Okay, we are ready for the other opposers. Mr. Ragsdale, do you have someone on the line that's next in opposition?
Yes, Madam Chair. We have 3 people on the line in opposition, and the first is Ms. Lynette Fowler.
Hello?
Hello, can you give us your address?
My address is 7329 Serena Drive in Arlington, 38002.
Go ahead.
Okay, I had initially opposed this extension. I would be okay with this extension upon conditions. The reduction of the time operation from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and the 4 years instead of 5 years would suit me. I did have some concerns, and my concern is that they will keep their word and put the property to good use that will restore the community and make it better, which they say they will do. My hope is that they will keep their word. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, do you have any questions of Ms. Farger? Any questions for her? Okay. Mr. Ragsdale, the next speaker.
Mr. Jerry Ellis.
My name is Jerry Ellis. I live at 10730 Millington, Arlington Road. I've been listening to this meeting 30 minutes before I actually got on the air, so I want to say hi to Brown York. I actually was a superintendent for his dad. And now that I've said that, listening to the praise that Lehman Roberts got during that 30-minute conversation, but I listened to Brown talk about his drive-off pad, his nice job over here on White Station. Well, I drove by it while I've been listening this whole time, and he has some great drive-off maps. It's called Stormwater Runoff Plan. Well, Memphis Stone and Gravel has 8 entrances with no plan, no runoff pads. Mr. Brown has some awesome pads. And as far as the hours go, if Mr. Brown and members would go to my Facebook page, this past week, they started at 5:05 in the morning with the trucks coming through the neighborhood. They drive from an hour away all the way down in Tipton County to get to that job, get to my house at 5:08 in the morning. That's when I posted the video. And as far as, did y'all understand all them things that tie together and all that stuff? Well, Alan Parks told me, I forgot to say hi to Alan and Homer over there. How y'all doing? But anyway, all them pits are tied together and they own them. So that little plan that they're asking for an extension on, they've been asking for since 2010. But he told me it's only going to take 6 to 8 months to dig out. But they're going to ask for another extension. Now, all these extensions are in between election times. In between election times, they're hoping y'all forget about them. But we started out with just trying to get some yellow lines painted over in a curve 2 years ago when Miss Mills got elected. But Jerry Rowland didn't even know that section of, Homer actually said it a while ago, Highway 205 belongs to the county somehow. Jerry Rowland didn't even know it. He got up in a meeting and escorted me back there to meet Alan Parks, which has lied to me so many times I won't even shake his hand. Y'all might be muting me, I don't know. But if y'all go to my Facebook page, you'll see how much we don't like it. I ain't nobody, but there's been 5,000 people looked at the video since I met Alan Parks nailing that sign in the ground. And that sign is only have to be out there for 2 weeks. So if you don't drive by there, you don't know that this meeting's happening right now. The neighbor around the corner, if you'll go to my Facebook page, shows some sand that was in the road. She says it was there for over a month. She called the plant and asked to get it swept up. All right? And I'm asking because we've been begging for them to get them trucks to go to enter and leave from the west and cover their load. You go to Standard Yard, because you don't ever hear nothing from them, because they've got signs everywhere that says, cover your load. Well, that sand and gravel is theirs till it's paid for. And they don't run a cash business, so all that sand and gravel is theirs. And you got to be a engineer genius to figure out where all them pits go. You go to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and one of my videos shows me doing a job on Walnut Grove with the drive-out pads and everything. But I kept getting this message that kept telling me what I had to do right by the neighborhood. And it went to Chattanooga. Then it come all the way back out here to an intersection one day at Memphis Stone and Gravel with me and the guy that works for the Tennessee EPA. Now, that's how far you got to go to get a culvert put in to get the water to drain. I had to go to the Tennessee EPA, pull up maps from years and years ago showing the water draining to the south to get them to put the culvert back in. But then you go around the corner over here, they ain't really telling you about the Crenshaw estate because they've told all these people in this subdivision they're done digging. But if you go over here to the Crenshaw estate, they still got 2 to 5 more years of digging over there that they're not telling nobody about. But if you look at that map and you see all them little blocks is money coming in every year, like $3,000 toward our property taxes, $5,000. I said, but if you look at them mud holes on the left-hand side, it's worthless. You might get it in the green belt. You can't build on it for 20 to 30 years. And then we asked them to help with the trucks, and they're going to talk about $120,000 in taxes. Well, our roads are actually paid for by fuel taxes. So 3 of the major trucking companies are from Tipton County, and one of them, he's bound and determined to come down our road, which has 7 curves in it. But last year on February the 14th, which is mine and my wife's anniversary, I went to your meeting, and you wouldn't let me speak. Miss Mills was sitting right beside of me. The hours were different, and it was so horrible to go 1.5 miles straight that Homer got up there and said that they needed to widen the road, and they were going to take the neighbors' front yards to do it. But nobody asked were they going to move the plant. No, they were going to come down Mulberry, cross over Brunswick, come down Brunswick, come back to 205, and take that same gravel and put it in the pit, wash it around, and then send it back out by them trucks again. Now, all this is over me and Alan Parks trying to get them trucks to go to the west. But their own lawyer got up there February the 14th last year and said how dangerous a straight road was. And ours has 7 curves. I almost got hit yesterday head on after my daughter said she hadn't seen any all day. But go to my video page and you'll see the last few days of trucks there at 5:08 in the morning. But the last few days, all the neighbors between here and Tipton County got an hour of sleep, and they don't know that it's me that's done it. So if you can spare me a few minutes, or Miss Mills, me and her talked for an hour one day over this. Usually I don't get this long to speak. Usually it's only 3 minutes.
Well, you only...
Madam Chair, I was going to mention we have one more speaker after Mr. Ellis.
Yeah, and Mr. Ellis, you've spoken 7 minutes so far.
That's fine. That's fine. I mean, if y'all listen, that's one thing. Don't give them the extension because they do it. If they keep a foothold out there, they've been 10 years trying to get an extension on this piece of ground that he says is going to take 6 months. Well, he's done told y'all 2 years. So they lie to all these neighbors, and the sand in the road, if you go to my thing, they don't have no drive-out pads on any of the pieces of property. I've called the sheriff on them 4 times this past year. The sheriff won't do nothing for the speeding because they say they can't outrun the radio. So we're asking them to get them trucks to go to the enter and leave from the west and leave us alone because their own lawyers said a straight road is horribly dangerous. Now you put all these trucks that have to be on get paid by the load. I got videos that show one truck.
Chair, 30 seconds remaining.
70 miles an hour.
Okay, we need to listen to Mr. White, Britton White, or Miss Britton White. So
that's fine.
Can we
Thank you.
Go ahead to the next opposition, please, Mr. Ellis?
Hi, my name is Britton
Yes,
White.
Madam Chair. Mr. White is on.
Good morning. My name is Britton White. My address is 10095 Santa Rosa Drive, Atoka, Tennessee. But to be clear, I am in northeast Shelby County. I do not live in Tipton County. One of the first things if you can go back in the slide deck to where it's discussed the 1981 Shelby County Code, please, for me. That would be helpful.
Okay, you just got about 1 minute.
Okay, so there are inconsistencies in the presentation here in that there's a 1981 code referenced in the presentation. However, in the staff report, the Unified Development Code is referenced. In actuality, the 1992 Shelby County Code governs this special use permit. It is difficult to extend an SUP when it's void. There was no activity for 8 years on the Rosenberg property. Not all SUP requirements have been met. There have been violations of not only the SUP, but Shelby County Code. There have been environmental violations that have been documented by TDEC. And there's nowhere in the Shelby County Code that allows for a 5-year extension. Lastly, Mr. Homer Brandon called me last Thursday, and it was a nice conversation, but at the very beginning of the conversation, he said I was very thorough. So there are many issues with this SUP extension request here, and I hope that you all have had an opportunity to read not only my email, but the supporting documentation. This extension request should be denied because it's too many issues with the SUP existing, and the permit is technically void. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Board members, do you have any questions of Ellis or White? Hearing none, you have no questions for Mr. Ellis or Mr. White. Then I'm going to close the public portion of the meeting. However, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Whitehead, who has some technical information for us. We have closed the public portion, and it's now in the hands, before we get a motion, of Mr. Whitehead.
Well, Madam Chair, I was going to address whatever procedural questions the body has, but I think Mr. Brandon, in his rebuttal,
I forgot.
may also
I'm sorry, Mr. Brandon.
Goes to the rebuttal first.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Brandon. I didn't do that on purpose. Mr. Brandon?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Chair Lady. Yes, ma'am. I appreciate that. And Mr. White, I did have a nice conversation with you, and I did say you're thorough. You write a lot, and you had a lot. But I think Mr. Whitehead and Mr. Robert Rowing had lots of discussions with you in mails and emails, and I think they came to the conclusion that we're operating properly and that the application is properly before the Land Use Control Board. But I did enjoy talking to you. Mr. Ellis talked about the trucks on the road. This is a state highway, 205. And there are lots of trucks probably going up and down, but we have calculated only about 15% go east. 85% of all the trucks that come from Memphis Stone and Gravel go to Austin P Highway, which is the state highway, which is under improvement and will be widened shortly. In regards to the time on the Crenshaw track, as Mr. Ellis said, we've only got 3 years left on the Crenshaw track, but we do have 5 years left on the Duke track, and we have agreed and would be glad to agree to lower the hours of operation from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock, and close at 7 o'clock unless it's dark. And if it gets dark like it does in the winter at 5 o'clock, then we're out of business. We're at that location. We can't hardly agree on the truck covers, but because the state really controls that, and we do have a lot of customers that come in, not necessarily from us, but from other places, and we can't control it. And there needs to be a state law passed as the commissioner pointed out, and I think we'd be in favor of that and be glad to help. But we do agree that the time extension would be reduced from 5 years to Memphis Stone will begin operations within 2-year period and will be completed within the next 2 years after they have completed. So if they be a 4-year term, we would agree to that. We appreciate all the help that the staff has given us. We agree with all the conditions as has been recommended. And with these amendments, we would appreciate your support. It is a valuable material. It is good for the economy, as the staff has also pointed out, to have a ready supply. And you can't find this stuff everywhere. And so you have to go to Tate County, Mississippi to get it, or you have to go up north somewhere to bring it down, and that will increase the cost of construction. So I would close by saying that this property will be reclaimed. It will be put back to a useful purpose as shown in the photographs that we presented. You can certainly see how it's wonderful open space or subdivisions or commercial that can be done on the property. So we respectfully ask for your approval and be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Brandon. I'm sorry for overlooking.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, board.
Not a problem.
Of Mr. Brandon. Any questions for Mr. Brandon at this time?
Madam Chair?
I do.
Yes.
I do. This is Jennifer O'Connell.
Okay.
You were talking about the hours of operation because it sounds like a lot of the opposition is just things that could be remedied, and it, just about being considerate to the neighbors and being, a good partner out there. The hours of operation were 6 o'clock, and you were going to move it to 7, but it seems that the trucks are arriving at 5 o'clock, so that they would still be arriving at 6. Is there any way to control that so that the trucks aren't coming in, noisy trucks and waking neighbors and that type of thing?
Lady, may I ask Mr. Alan Parks, who represents the company, to respond to that question?
Sure.
Okay, Alan, go ahead.
Yes.
Give me your address.
Yeah, my name's Alan Parks, Vice President of Memphis Stone and Gravel Company. Address is P.O. Box 1683, Memphis, Tennessee 38101. The time frame, the 6 to 7, which is in our permit, that applies to the operation, and for the Rosenberg tract, we're willing to concede to that, to move it to 7 to 7. We do not allow trucks to be loaded prior to 6 o'clock, and all trucks are weighed, and we have date stamps for all of our trucks, and we don't start the operation up until 6. Now there may be times where our superintendent or scale house manager may report the work earlier, but we don't start operationally loading trucks until after 6 o'clock at the plant, which is quite a distance away from where this operation, the Rosenberg track, is located.
I guess I failed the point.
It just had sounded like the neighbors, that was one of the complaints from the neighbors, is that there were trucks arriving at 5 o'clock.
Well, we don't allow the trucks in there. We've recommunicated that to the on-site staff that we will not open up the gate until after 6 o'clock. Our good neighbor, we do have a good neighbor truck.
That would be 7 o'clock, correct?
Well, not at the plant, not at the plant site. This is the 7 o'clock we're agreeing to is the operation, the mining operation, which is next door to Arlington Way subdivision. Okay, the plant is located probably 2 miles, mile and a half to 2 miles away. We move all of our raw material by a conveyor system to get the material to the plant where it's processed. That's where most of the trucking activity occurs. Now, that location, we do not open up the gate until 6 o'clock to allow the trucks to enter, so no trucks would be loaded until after 6 o'clock. So they probably would not be leaving the site until about 6:15. Most of that trucking activity is pretty much done by 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It tapers off through the day, and most of it is done by late afternoon.
There are not a lot of trucks coming out of the Rosenberg tract, this subject property. In fact, all of the trucks that do have come through the Duke property, which is further to the west. But most of the material, if not all, is moved by conveyor over to the main plant. So there's not trucks coming out of this property in any regular order.
There's really none coming out of the Rosenberg tract. Any trucks that do come off of this area is from the Duke permit, which is permitted separately.
Okay. I was just trying to figure out how to kind of assuage the concerns of the neighbors while supporting the operation, this very, important operation. So I was just trying to figure out how we can bridge that.
Yes, ma'am. And let me add this. We do have a good neighbor trucking policy that we have every truck driver that hauls product from our location. We ask them to agree to our good neighbor trucking policy, and they sign it to agree to abide by our rules, and it governs things like the time that, like the haul route or time of operations, speed limit. And if we get a complaint, as we have in the past, we will investigate that complaint and make sure the truck drivers understand about our rules, as well as remind them about speed limits or any other aspects that they need to abide by. And if we don't get compliance, then we'll just refuse to load them. But very rarely do we have to take it to that level, because by and large, most of the truck drivers understand they've got to be good neighbors for us to stay in business.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions before I close the public portion of the meeting and we hear from Mr. Whitehead? Any more questions of the applicant? Okay, hearing none.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I do have two questions for the applicant based upon some comments that Mr. Ellis made. He mentioned something called drive-out paths along the public highways between the site and the highway. And number two, he mentioned entering and exiting only from the west, presumably to get over to Austin P. And I wanted the applicant's feedback on those two possible conditions.
Okay. Mr. Parks would respond to that, please.
Okay. Regarding the pads, I'm not exactly clear. I'm assuming he's talking about like having a gravel pavement or something like that as the trucks exit. Our both points of entry at our operations where trucks are involved is paved, and we do have a wheel wash system in place that will, if there's any track out, we will, the trucks can go through that wheel wash, as well as if there's anything that is tracked out, we do have a street sweeper, a dedicated street sweeper that is at that location, and they monitor that and try to keep the road clear of any debris that might be tracked out onto the road. Regarding the traffic going west, as Mr. Brandon indicated, 85 to 90% of our truck traffic goes westbound. There are occasions where customers have to be served in an eastward direction, and that's where trucks would travel eastbound. So we feel like that it's a fairly limited amount of trucks that's going that way, but it is essential to have that capability for us to haul material in that direction, as our competitors use that same haul route. So we are not the only aggregate producer that is traveling eastbound.
Thank you. Standard is also up in that area.
Yes, and so we like to have the ability to travel east. We've encouraged all of our truckers, which are independent of us. I mean, these are our customers' trucks. We've encouraged them through our Good Neighbor Trucking policy to, if it's an option, to travel westbound and only go eastbound if it's necessary, and they've agreed to do that.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Whitehead?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Both questions, Mr. Whitehead?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, if there are not any more questions, are there any more questions? So we're going to close the public portion of the meeting and turn it over to Mr. Whitehead prior to the motion to give us some technical information.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Mr. Brannon and Mr. Bacchus and Mr. Penzis in the writing of the staff report covered it, but I just wanted to reiterate. Typically, the kinds of special use permits that this body acts on a monthly basis are hotels, cell towers, and vehicle sales. I think those are the top three. And I cannot think of, it's very rare that we condition special use permits to expire at a certain time, right? Once the Peabody gets its special use permit, it's got that special use permit forever, and including changes of ownership. Same thing with cell towers. Sometimes, however, particularly in cases like this, where, in Mr. Bacchus's words, an interim or a transitional land use is being proposed, that's when we go ahead and do these sunset provisions, for lack of a better term. And this special use permit, as many of them, as many gravel mining operations do, has a sunset provision. So the UDC does not apply here, because the UDC's time extensions are for those special use permits never implemented. In other words, the Peabody Hotel gets its special use permit, but it doesn't. That's a bad example. A Holiday Inn gets its special use permit, and it's never built within that 2 years. And in fact, the word in the UDC is implement, and we are fairly generous in that interpretation of the word implement. Has Holiday Inn at least tried to pull its building permits? Has Holiday Inn taken any move whatsoever in implementing the special use permit within 2 years? That's when that 2-year time frame applies to. Here, we have a sunset provision that's in the conditions of approval, and that is what's subject. That's what we are discussing. The UDC does talk about time extensions. With that said, that is in chapter 9.16, and if I can paraphrase that section, it looks at, has the neighborhood changed since the original approval? Because the presumption is whatever findings, in this case the county commission or the city council, made in its original approval, those findings are still in place so long as there hasn't been either conditions broken or changes in the neighborhood. So I just wanted to give the procedural posture of this case very briefly. With that, Madam Chair, I'll turn the floor back over to you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I believe it's time for a motion. Dr. Pritchard?
Yes, Madam Chair. I move approval of agenda item number 6, SUP 09-217CO.
Second.
That was Ms. Wilbanks gave a second. Okay, is there any discussion? Is there any discussion amongst our board members? Okay, hearing none, I'm assuming we're ready to vote, and I believe we're going to do this individually as well.
Madam Chair, based upon the testimony provided this morning, it does seem like there was some agreement to massaging some of these conditions.
Right.
I'm on page 25 of the staff report, where you find condition number. Are you with me? I'll let everybody get to page 25. On page 25, you'll find condition number 19. That speaks to the hours of operation. I believe the applicant was amenable, and there was some compromise and agreement on changing that from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So changing the beginning time up an hour. That I think the next agreed upon amendment to the condition is condition number 30. That's on page 26. And what I wrote down was the following. Let's strike the language that you find in the staff report, and in its place, write, in accordance with condition 18, the time extension shall begin within 2 years of the original expiration date and expire 2 years thereafter, period. And I think those are the two conditions that there was some agreement on amending.
Okay, so do we need to make the motion again as amended, or you read
Well,
that
Yes, that would be fine with me.
Thank you. And the second?
Yes.
Okay, got you. Now we're good.
Okay. We've had a second. The motion has been made as amended, and we're ready for discussion. Is there any discussion amongst our board members? Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I assume we're ready to vote. Are we going to vote individually or as a group, Mr. Whitehead?
Well, I think the executive order regarding telephonic meetings requires individual votes on contested matters. So let's do a roll call.
Okay.
Dr. Pritchard? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Pritchard. Mr. Thomas?
Hello?
I'll come back to Yes, Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Wilbanks?
Yes.
Yes. And we have a yes from Ms. Wilbanks. Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mr. Gill?
Yes.
Vice Chair Lyles Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon?
Yes.
Ms. O'Connell?
Yes.
And Madam Chair?
Yes.
That's 9 ayes.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. Do we have anything else, Mr. Secretary and or Mr. Whitehead and or Mr. Ragsdale?
No, ma'am.
Oh, okay, then meeting is adjourned as I speak at 11:48 a.m. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.